Greetings and welcome to another lesson with Odin. So, because I hate repeating myself, I am going to make this video as a sort of guideline, building block, technique, what have you, that you can add on to your design and beadworking arsenal. So today I am going to talk to you about bales and making bales on a bezel. If you noticed in previous videos, whenever I do specific projects, I'll show you how to make a ring band or a bale for a project, something like that. Well, I figured I could make a video just to do that and teach you how to kind of do it your way, so that you don't have to be restricted by what I show you. And a lot of tutorials that you see online, or wherever you see your tutorials, you probably have one way of doing it, but you'd be like, oh, well, that'd be nice as a pair of earrings, or a ring instead. So, this video is going to focus on bales. I'm going to do another video that is on ring bands. So I just want to kind of keep it focused, because I could talk a lot about these things, oddly enough. If you want to know more about this, be sure to add this to whatever your playlists are, save it, bookmark it, what have you, so that you always, so when I release a new bezel or something like that, you can go back to this video and be like, alright, how do I want to put this together? So do that. And while you're at it, if you haven't done so already, or if you're new here, hi, feel free to subscribe and ring the bell whenever I upload new videos, and you will be notified when I do rather obnoxious things. So, for this project, you will need a thing that you want to dangle from some other thing. I have this pendant as an example. This is one of my snowflakes that I have as a PDF over on my website at odins.musings. And then you will need other things to string around that thing to make this thing hang. You can use seed beads, size 11 or size 15 if you feel comfortable. I prefer size 15s personally because I like the daintier bale. I want the focus to be more on the piece rather than the bale itself, but the bale can be pretty however you like. You can use crystals to make a bale and just chain it together. Possibly a jump ring if you want to do a simple bale, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Whatever you are hanging it from, whether it be a necklace or an earring, there's kind of two different methodologies on that. So, all that being said, let us get started. Now, the first thing you are going to want to determine is what thing you are hanging your thing from. There's two different methodologies when it comes to earrings and pendants. Sort of. There are kind of ways to go around it. So, with an earring, your ear wires commonly are positioned in perpendicular to the actual piece itself. So because of that, you want to make your bale flat and around, which is actually the easiest way to do this. So if your pendant is flat like that, you'll want your bale flat in the same position. So for this instance, I have a center bead on top. I just looped a loop of beads around in sort of a picot, just a really large picot, around that center bead, and then I hooked on my ear wire. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it this way. If somehow your bale is in the opposite orientation, where the hole is not parallel to the actual pendant, like this hole is parallel to this one is perpendicular. The easiest way to fix that is you just take a pair of pliers, twist it around, twist your ear wire so that the ear wire is flat. Now in this case you'll see, because this pendant isn't formatted like that, it ends up hanging sideways. But you can just easily twist that back, and it's back to where its orientation needs to be. Now be careful when you do that, because especially with cheaper ear wires, it will snap at that hook if you twist it too much. So, just to be safe, we'll put a bale there, in that orientation, wherever the ear wire likes to be, or how you bought it, basically. but that is for earrings. Now, when it comes to pendants, you will actually want the bail hole to be perpendicular to the rest of the pendant because of the way the necklace will hang on it. It's going to be flat against your skin. What I have done is I have created the same bail from a bead here, and it looks similar to the earring bail. And then before I completed it, I added a closed jump ring just to make it nice and secure. You can just, if you forget, like I do all the time, you can use an open jump ring and hook it on later, but you might want to like solder or glue the seam of the jump ring, because this thread, I had the worst luck when it comes to beading thread, and the seam just immediately finds where the thread is and slips out. So that's why I like to use closed jump rings. And yes, so let's kind of take a look on how you would make those kind of bails. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out where you want to hang your pendant from. Generally, if you're making a round bezel, everything is symmetrical, so you don't have to worry about too much as to where you want to put it. But if it's something that's asymmetrical, like this, where I have a focal piece at the bottom, you'll want to find something towards the top to hook on your bail. And there's a variety of places you can go. I can find a central seed bead to go through in order to hang it. This will work similarly with the peyote too. So for example, something in the peyote stitch, you can just kind of push your needle down and make your loop starting point from there. This will be like your anchor bead, so to speak. You can also move back and use something larger, like a crystal bead back here, which is generally the easiest place to do things. Then I'm going to add my number of beads that I want for my bail. And again, it depends on what you want to do. If you have some hardware that you're going to put in there that's very thick, you're going to add more beads, or if you're going to add another extension in order to transform it to another position, you're probably going to add less, so the hole isn't that big when you thread it through. Like for example, this one, I added a lot more beads because this is the only thing I wanted to have to use as the bail. Whereas this one, I didn't want to make the bail a focal piece, and I didn't really want it that visible, so I used a much smaller number of beads to make a smaller loop. Generally, anything between 5 and 12 beads is what you're going to play with, depending on what you want to do and how far you want things to hang. So I've got 6 beads here, and I'm coming out of that crystal bead in the back. I'm just going to pass through, backwards, through that crystal bead again, so that when I pull this tight, that loop forms. Then I will reinforce it and end my thread. From there, I can either hook on a jump ring or an ear wire right in the center so that it hangs nicely. So that is just the simplest way to do it. If you're using a closed jump ring, you're going to add the beads of your bail as well as the closed jump ring, pass back through that crystal, and pull tight. So now that I have a proper orientation for a pendant, because the loop is perpendicular to the rest of the pendant. And you can feel free to string it on through your necklace chain, and it will hang properly, like so, so that your pendant is flat. You'll also want to reinforce this so nothing comes loose, and since this is the point where the most weight is going to be bared, you're going to want to reinforce that as much as possible, because that's going to be the first point where the necklace breaks. You can also make the bail grab some more attention by going through larger gaps. Say if you want to have like a pattern of crystals in between the jump ring or what have you, you can jump large gaps. For example, this set of super duos here. So instead I would add 3 seed beads, a crystal, my jump ring, another crystal, and 3 seed beads. Now this depends on the jump ring. If the jump ring is large enough that it goes over all of your beads, you don't really need to worry about where you thread it in the pattern. Like for this example, this hole will just go right through, so I don't really need to worry about it. But then I will jump the gap entirely and have a larger bail like this. So from there I would just travel down the super duo, go back along this rim, and go back up through the super duo to reinforce. and then end my threads there. And that is kind of the simplest method you can use in order to attach a bail to a pendant. I got some other examples here. With this one, I have traveled through 2 of these seed beads to form a gap, and I've added 4 seed beads between that and threaded a giant jump ring there. Same thing here. I added 2 jump rings because this bead was so large that I needed a bigger thing to throw the gap, and it just seemed more aesthetically pleasing to add 2 and reinforce. And I've shown you this piece, which is just anchored on the crystal in the back, just a large bail there. So, I'll teach you a little bit more about positioning. This is a design I found in a Bead and Button magazine that I was playing with. I can't remember what it is, but I will put it in the comments once I found it, or a text thingy here. But there's a lot of places you can put an anchor point if you want. You can use this 3mm bead to just hang a bail over there. You can anchor it through these 2 seed beads. And I would go through both of them since that is the center point. If this was an odd number of beads, I would go through the center bead, but since this is even, I pass through 2 instead of 1, so that's just something to keep in mind. If you wanted to make it look like a diamond, if you wanted a little square pendant, I would go up here, and so I'd just pick up this center bead here and attach a bail to it. It's just a matter of how your piece is structured and what you want to do, how you want it to hang, and so forth. Now, you can also use basic bead stitches to form a bail, and it's just depending on what your favorite stitches are. Personally, I love using the herringbone stitch to make a bail because, for me personally, it's fast, and I can get a bail done much quicker without as much reinforcing. And I will have a primer of basic bead stitches coming soon. I did a lot of them on Aura Crystal's site, so I'll leave a link to that channel if you want to see more of my basic beginners projects and the beginner stitches there. But in the meantime, before I'm working on the basic stitches on this channel. So this is an example of a herringbone bail. You can see it's just 1 column of herringbone wrapped into itself. And it's very simple to do. So say, for example, you are coming out of a single seed bead in the center of the back of your bail. I'm going to start off my herringbone right from there. This will also work if you have 2 seed beads in the center. So what I'm going to do to start off is add 2 seed beads, pass back around through that same seed bead, so that I have 2 sitting on top of each other, like that. Then, I'm going to go up. I'm going to start another stitch of herringbone by adding 2, going down 1. Then I'm going to pass back through that single seed bead on the bezel itself, so that I have a little bit more of reinforcement in there. This can get tricky if you have a lot of thread passes going through that bead. But if I get up there, I'm going to travel back up the 2 beads I've added on the next column. Keep going with my herringbone. I'm going to add 2, go down only 1 on the other side, pull through, go up 2 beads from the previous column, and keep going until you have a reasonable length. That can vary depending on what exactly you want to attach this to. If you're going through something like a small chain, you probably don't need to go very far. Something like thicker, like a cord or a rope, especially when it comes to like a beaded rope, you're going to need more. Anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 2 inches, depending on how you're hanging it, which can be anything from about 12 to 30 stitches, just if you need a reference like that. So keep going until you have the strip that you want, and you can test out the length of your bail just by wrapping it around the final cord that you plan on threading it through. If you want to make it interchangeable to be able to thread around the clasp of your necklace, you'll want to have it even longer than that. But once you have the length of the bail that you want, you have a couple of options when it comes to finishing this. You can wrap around and act like a herringbone back on the same bead that you started from on the bezel. So, for example, here you thread it through, But if you're afraid of all the tension that is inside that bead, you can go a bead either behind it, like this crystal, or in front of it, like another crystal in the front. You can loop it around in this direction, or pull it forward in this direction. So, my thread is coming out of the right side of the bezel. I'm going to then go through the right side of my anchor bead, which in this case is going to be this purple crystal. Pull it forward, and my thread is coming out of the opposite side of my anchor bead. I'm going to thread through the side that hasn't been anchored yet. And then I go around these beads once more to secure it in place, and then maybe if I want some more structure, thread back and forth through the herringbone. However, you might notice that since this crystal is so much larger, you got some exposed threads there. So to fix this, before you anchor on the bail to your crystal bead, you can add one more seed bead, or more, depending on how large the bead is, and pass through the anchor bead again. Then, add on one more seed bead and pass through the opposite side of the bail, so that you kind of form a bridge around the bead that isn't so flush together with it, and there's not as much exposed threads. Then you can reinforce once more and end the thread here. And that can also apply if your anchor bead starts at a wider gap between that and the next herringbone. So for this example, I'm going to use 4 beads to start off my point, pass back through my anchor crystal, so that I end up with that. Then I'm going to pass up through 2 beads, and I'm going to add 2 more beads to start off my herringbone, go down the very next bead on this loop, and these are going to form my herringbone stitch. So from there, I'm going to pass back up through 2 beads. Now, we have the second bead from the starting ring that we wrapped around the crystal, and the row that we just added. And that is what our bezel looks like. We have a gap that spans over the crystal. You may want to add 6 beads instead of 4. In that case, you still use the center 2 beads to make your herringbone. And you just keep building up and wrap the bail around to anchor it to another bead, or the same one, since this is a crystal bead and it has much more room to pass the needle through. Another fast stitch to use is the ladder stitch. So I've got my initial ring wrapped around my crystal bead, which is 4 beads. You may want 6 if you're using a 4mm bead. If you're using a single or double size 11 or 15 seed bead, you'll want to only thread on 2 and use those for your ladder stitch. But just like the herringbone, I'm going to move up. So I'm going to move up 3 beads, leaving 1 on the outside, so that I'm through both of the center 2 beads. This is going to be just something left on the side when we start our ladder stitch. Once again, you may want to reinforce this before you continue on to your ladder stitch, so that you have a nice anchor point and everything sits nice in place. So to start my ladder stitch, I'm going to add 2 beads and pass back through the center 2 beads. Pull that through, so that those 2 beads sit right on top of the previous 2. To move on to the next stitch, you just move on to the beads that you've just added. Now me, personally, I like to reinforce once more by going through the previous beads again, before moving back up through the furthermost, and continuing on. This is much easier done with size 11 seed beads, because size 15s have a limited amount of passes you can go through, but I like going through because it makes the stitch nice and neat. So to continue on, I'm going to add 2 more size 11 seed beads, pass through, so that I end up there, then pass back through the top 2 in order to cinch those in place. Now, anchoring them as a bail is the same exact thought process as the herringbone. You're either going to anchor it on a bead in front, wrap it forward, something in back, or on the same bead. So what you'll do is, if I had a seed bead as my anchor point, all I would do is just pass immediately through one side of my anchor bead, and pass back through the opposite side of the end of the bail to anchor that in place. But since I have a crystal here, I have those thread gaps again that I'll want to cover. But since this is spanning around a crystal, I will add one seed bead, go through the crystal, add another seed bead, and go through the opposite side, just like the herringbone. You can also apply this with the right angle weave. If you're coming out of a single anchor bead, I'm just going to add 3 seed beads, pass back through to start a right angle weave. Then I'll reinforce it, if I can, and then move up to the top bead again, add another 3 seed beads, and pass through that center bead, reinforce, move up to the centermost bead, add my 3, and continue on. So to anchor this back on a single bead, from the center, I'm going to add 1 seed bead, and my thread is coming out of the left. I'm going to go to the left to right, through that anchor bead, pull down, add 1 more seed bead, and find that center bead on the chain, like so, and pull through there. And you finish making a right angle weave unit with these 4 beads here, including the one on the bezel. Then you reinforce and end your thread. Now with your anchor bead being a crystal, you have a couple of options. You can thread an odd number of beads. For example, I have number 5. I will pass through that bicone, and then travel up until I am at the centermost bead. And from there, I can add 3 beads and start a single row of right angle weave, like we did with a single seed bead anchor point here. You can see how we start that. We'll move up, add another right angle weave, move up, and so forth. Then when we wrap around to complete our bail, you can either anchor it to this single seed bead here, or add extra seed beads to anchor it right through the crystal. Or you can add an even number of beads. Right now I have 6 on my thread. Pass back through that crystal, and then move up until I am through the centermost 2 beads. So in this example, I'm going to go up through 4. Then I'm going to add 6 more beads instead of 3 to have a 2 by 2 right angle weave square. I'm going to pass back through the center 2 beads, pull through till I form that loop, reinforce it, then we'll move to the center 2 beads on the opposite side. So we start to form a square like that. Add on 6 more beads, pass through 2 of the centermost beads, and so forth until you complete your chain. Then you anchor it back onto your crystal or another bead on the bezel. And that's pretty much it for the actual techniques of bails. You can expand on this, do stitches with longer pieces or shorter pieces. You can try it with a 4-column wide herringbone instead of a 2-column wide. You can do a 3x3 right angle weave, and so forth, depending on what you want things to look like and what have you. You can also use peyote to do a bail, but this is best done on a bail that is primarily peyote anyway, because what you'll do is you'll basically build the peyote on top. I'm not going to show you that this time, but if you'd like me to go into more detail, let me know, and I will do a tutorial just on peyote bezels. And if you get pretty comfortable with doing this on a single point, you can also experiment and do it on 2 points, so that you can have an interesting Y necklace if you wanted to have like fringe on the bottom or something, or just have it hang differently. So for the example, I have 2 strands of herringbone on sides of about, I don't know, 45, 90 degrees. This way, where this pendant still hangs in the center. But it's just out to the side like that. So, just some things to consider. You can even do that with multiple strands. So if you wanted to do, instead of like 2, you can do 4 to have something cool hanging from here, and so forth. Just kind of play with it. It's a basic technique, but think about where you want things to hang and how you want things to look. And if push comes to shove, you can always just ram wire through it. In these examples, I've wrapped wires around crystals. This one was a beaded bead, so I just shoved a big old wire chunk all the way through. But that's just some things to consider. Alright, so I know this was a long-winded video, but I hope you learned something and I kind of twisted your brain to think about these things beyond basics, to kind of help you develop your own patterns and your own ways of hanging your dangly parts. All that being said, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got some info that is important out of this. I will be doing one on ring bands, which is kind of just like another step. You're just having 2 anchor points instead of 1. And yes, so let me know in the comments what you thought. If there's anything I need to extrapolate upon and build further on, let me know. Ask questions in the comments. I am always there. And if there's any other tutorials that you want to see from me, let me know. If not here, you can always ask at our Facebook group at Creations from Lesson with Odin, and even ask all the other fantastic beaters that are willing to help as well. That will do it from me. Be sure to like up this video and subscribe for more bullshit from me, including jewelry shit and other shenanigans that I get up to. Thank you so much to all of my patrons for making this video possible. Without your help, I would not be able to do this as frequently. I hope this helps bring more content to you. If you'd also like to be a patron and be like, hey Odin, you're doing cool shit, and get exclusive access to tutorials that are not posted on YouTube, check out my Patreon page down below. For just $1 a month, you get tutorials. At least 1 per month, so be sure to check all that in the description box down below. Thank y'all so much for joining me, and of course, if there's anything I need to be trying out right now, feel free to let me know down below. I will see you next time.